fiddle styles in the Southern Appalachians are different than what you'd find in the British Isles. There was something that changed it over and transformed it. And I just wanted to get to the bottom of it. I'd heard of Cecil Sharp, the ballad collector, coming over here and coming across dances in eastern Kentucky, and he was finding people singing the old ballads like Barbara Allen and such. And when he saw and he knew that those had their roots in British Isles, of course they do. But when he saw the dances, he just assumed the same was true with the dances, and that just it just didn't seem right to me. So I started doing some research, and it took about a dozen or more years until I had a story to tell of where I think these dances came from. In the British Isles, the ballad tradition is generally a cappella solo singing. It's not group singing. It's not accompanied with instruments, and that tradition certainly came over here intact, and people still sing many of the old ballads that can be traced back. But if you look at the vocal traditions here in the mountains, there are so many other elements to that tradition. Parlor songs from the 1800s and Tin Pan Alley songs and gospel songs and shape note singing and blues songs and the many of those other traditions involve harmony singing and involve backing up with an instrument, which wouldn't have found in the old ballad tradition. So that's something that changed in this country. With the instrumental traditions, the earliest instrument that was brought across would have been the fiddle, and the fiddle or the violin, as you might want to call it. And those instruments were certainly used for the dance music in the British Isles, and they were used in this country. This would have been the instrument that was used on the frontier for dances. There were no other instruments, and the reason the fiddle made it into this tradition is not only if you had a fiddle, it was small and easy to carry, but it was an instrument that could be manufactured on the frontier. The woods, you could go out and cut down trees. You could make the top out of spruce and the back out of maple, and the strings would be made out of some kind of twisted catgut, and the bow would be a horse's tail. And those are all things that you could get anywhere you were. You didn't have to have a factory to ship this instrument to you. So people played homemade fiddles. They made them out of gourds and all kinds of things. So it was homemade music, and that was the instrument that was used for the dances initially. Later on, the African-derived banjo joined in the mix in the mid-1800s, probably as a result of its popularity through minstrel shows, but also there were African Americans living in the mountains who played the banjo, and the banjo and the fiddle made a fantastic combination. So by the late 1800s, you had banjos and fiddles played together, and accompanying with a banjo certainly would have changed some of the fiddling styles. And in fact, the African tradition is not just in the banjo, but there were black fiddlers throughout the mountains too who contributed repertoire and stylings to the music, and that would have changed the music right there. Some of the fiddle tunes that we play nowadays, whether it's Soldier's Joy or Billy in the Low Ground or Leather Breeches, those certainly have roots in Scottish tunes, but there's so many others that we play that certainly didn't come from the British Isles and very likely came from the black tradition in this country. Cotton Eye Joe, Liza Jane, Cumberland Gap. I mean, probably the majority of the fiddle tunes that we play at dances did not come from the British Isles. Every once in a while there is one that you say, oh yes, that one is one of the old ones from the British Isles, but most of them didn't. Most of them are American creations, and when we say American creations, we have to assume that it's going to have some black influence, because that is truly what made it American and separated it from the British tradition. That was what added certain syncopations, certain rhythms, and so on to the music, and as well as the dances. In the early 20th century, much of the music and dance of the mountains was portrayed and promoted as being Anglo-Saxon. And it was done, I feel, with a certain agenda to portray the people of the mountains as this unbroken lineage from the British Isles, as the as the, our ancestors, our, in quotes, ancestors from the British Isles. And part of this portraying of the music was a direct result of, it was sort of a pushback against immigration. And in this, here we are in 2017, we hear a lot about anti-immigrant proposals in Congress and pushback against immigration. The same thing happened in the late 1800s when many, many folks from Southern and Eastern Europe came to this country. And Italians and Slavs and Jews and so many people were coming. And the old guard in the U.S. Sort of freaked out and said, "Wait a minute, we are the real Americans, not these people coming in." And at the same time, folk dancing began to be taught in public schools as a way to assimilate these new European kids to be real Americans. So initially, they started teaching European folk dances, or folk dances from the British Isles, thinking that our ancestors were from the British Isles. And at some point, somebody said, "Wait a minute, why don't we teach American folk dances?" And just what are our American folk dances? Where can we find them? Well, some people look to New England, where they saw contra dancing, which was an old tradition dating back to the colonial times. Other people look to the southern mountains, where they said, these are people who've been isolated for generations with no contact with the outside world. These are the true Americans, these Anglo-Saxons who settled in the mountains. And around this time is when Cecil Sharp comes over from England to collect ballads. And he's hearing this, I don't know, from people such as the president of Berea College, who was promoting this idea of the Southern Mountains being primarily Anglo-Saxon, and that's where these traditions were from. So he was hearing that, and he was finding people singing the British ballads, which they were certainly there. So he sort of wrapped it all up in one package, and even though he saw banjos and heard people singing blues, he completely ignored all that and just said, this is English, Anglo-Saxon stuff.